This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 10th of July 2024 at home in Wicklow. And it is something of a meditative, wellness, mindfulness themed episode. And amongst other things, I talk about that idea of mindfulness. I talk about how we think of ourselves in suffering, in pain, and trying to let go of that and emerge from that. I talk about the emotional and psychological prison we may impose on ourselves, or that prison that we may have the power to liberate ourselves from. And I talk about perspective. I talk about deep listening. I talk about the paradox of human existence, of the endless repetition of similar experiences that we all go through, and yet we experience them very individually. So I'm trying to look at that, and I begin the whole thing by contemplating the idea of how we approach the unknown, how we approach uncertainty, how we approach the anxiety that is induced by living in the world at this point in time. So really, it's a bit of a personal existential toolkit episode. And I hope you find something of use in what I have to offer today. Thank you for listening. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my moji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. I hope this moment finds you well. Did you know what you were letting yourself in for when you pressed play on this particular podcast? You can't have known. It's impossible. Unless somebody listened to it before you and laid it out for you, beat by beat, word by word, minute by minute, ramble by ramble. And then maybe you could have said, yeah, I knew what was coming. I knew what I was letting myself in for. But even then, you don't really, because everyone receives things differently. Nobody receives the same thing, do they? That's if you believe in the idea of self, the idea of the inner individual, their perceptions, their sensitivities, their senses, how they respond to the world, how they react to the world. If you believe in that individual human experience that is different for every single person, it's a weird thing. There's a contradiction or a paradox. So much of human experience is unendingly, predictably the same. The ceaseless repetition of existence, the ceaseless repetition of human experience, human rhythms, human behaviors, human patterns, human dynamics, human interactions, our interactions with others, our interactions with the world around us. They all repeat. But within that, every individual is on their own journey, and every individual is going through their own perception and understanding and experience of those repeated patterns, those repeated moments. So there is a paradox there. So even if someone had laid out exactly what was going on here today and said, and then he said this, and then the next thing he said was that, and then he paused, even if you memorized all of that, your experience would not be the same as the person who had previously listened. And you might be asking yourself, okay, and what the hell are you talking about? I just found myself standing there in what we now call the blue room. It used to be the green room. The green room was the previous room where we had our home office and where I record the podcast. And then we swapped rooms so our daughter could have the other room. And now we're in this room as the home office, and it's blue. I was standing here just trying to get some clear thoughts about what I might speak about in this week's episode. And I just had this thought roll across the screen of my mind, and 3 simple words were there: approaching the unknown. Approaching the unknown. What do we do when we're approaching the unknown? What do we do when we're stepping into an uncomfortable space and we don't know what's going to happen next? How are we equipped to deal with that? How are we equipped to respond? Or how have we conditioned ourselves to not be fearful, to not be swallowed up by our anxiety? How do we proceed with confidence? I don't know is the answer. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is for you. I've personally cultivated over the years a confidence to step into the unknown in certain environments. So there are certain known factors or known elements, but I've often stepped into spaces as a teacher, as a facilitator, as a martial arts instructor, not really knowing what's coming next, and just trusting that I'll have something to offer, that there'll be something I can do in that space simply by being there and listening and observing and getting a sense of what's around me. Then I can choose how to proceed. Now, there's another word for that. It's called bluffing. Or if you prefer, winging it, or blagging, chancing my arm. And there is an element of that. I mean, all those phrases have negative connotations, but that's because we're very conditioned. We're very conditioned and programmed by society, by the world, to really highly value ultra preparation, ultra structure, leaving nothing to chance, to constantly have plans. These things are the scaffolding of survival. These things are the scaffolding of thriving and of ascent, capitalist ascent, I would argue. And people are very unnerved when a plan isn't in place. Many people. But I don't want to get too bogged down in maybe like real practical, pragmatic settings, situations, logistics, because I find all that stuff, if you have to, that can all be negotiated pretty quickly, just by a little bit of in the moment troubleshooting, putting in place something, so you can do something else. But I think this idea of approaching the unknown in the larger sense of it, in the more sort of existential sense, I'm kind of more interested in that, because really we can never know what's next. We never know what's coming next. I don't know what's going to happen, a minute from now. What I think is going to happen is that I'll still be sitting here at this microphone talking, but anything could happen. Like that is a reality. isn't it? So we never really know what's coming next. And I think that there is what feels like, the COVID pandemic has been and gone in terms of its kind of immediate, its immediate kind of presence and dominance over the entire world. And now we're living with ripples of COVID. But I think there's a pandemic of anxiety in the world. And, there's a lot of different reasons for that. Some people are arguing at the moment that we are living in pre-war conditions with the various conflicts and geopolitical tensions and economic precarity of so many places in the world, the ever expanding wealth gap, resources deficits all around the place, and again, something I've referred to many times, the rise of populism, the rise of politics and political movements that are pretty close to extremism, that are pretty close to ethno-nationalism, political movements that seem to thrive on fear and anger and resentment, and the vilification of the other. These are all elements that contribute to a sense of uncertainty, a sense of imminent collapse or imminent explosion, imminent detonation, imminent chaos and destabilization. And these are not good things. These are not good things. These are very, very unsettling things to be receiving on our personal receivers. You may feel wherever you are, you may feel you're very removed from these things, but I would argue that the ripples reach us. They reach us on some level, and we take them in, and they occupy space inside us, and they are unsettling. And that element of being occupied, of having something stealing your peace, is very destructive. It's very destructive to our sense of well-being, our sense of calmness, our sense of capacity to proceed safely. And I think it takes quite a bit of, again, mindfulness is the word that comes to mind. But maybe that's mindfulness. A lot of these words have become a bit devalued or misappropriated, and they can sound a little bit fluffy and inconsequential. So I don't know, maybe we need a word that's a bit more muscular than mindfulness. It takes conscious effort. It takes conscious thought to stabilize oneself, to make oneself feel stronger, sturdier, more capable, more grounded, more resistant, perhaps. Resistant, okay, that word brings in a certain conflict I suppose, because you have to resist something. The other choice, of course, which I've spoken about before as well, is the idea of acceptance and receptivity, like stepping into this receptive space, a receptive mind that can just acknowledge something and let it pass through. And if you want to let something pass through you, that does take some practice. That does take, again, that conscious reckoning to go, there it is, there's that thought, or there's that sense of unease. I'm going to let it pass through. I'm not going to put a net down there to catch things. I'm going to take up the net and let things just pass through. I'm not going to hold on to anything with my catcher's mitt. I'm going to let things pass through, and I'm going to occupy my own space. I'm not going to be destabilized. I'm not going to be relocated, dislocated, moved on. I'm going to be where I need to be. I'm going to be where I want to be. And I'm going to let things pass through me. And I suppose the idea we're working with then is what to be. I mean, liquid water is not a bad element to play with here. To let things flow, to let things move through, to let the water carry things away. Fire, air, earth. There are different energies, different elemental ideas and forces that I believe we instinctively or intuitively respond to when we hear those words. Earth to me is very grounding, of course. But I tend to, as ever, I tend to think very literally about these things. Everything's a straight line. But I think these are good things to use in these, when we're stepping a toe into this kind of area of thinking. And there's a related idea that I was thinking about as well before sitting down to record. So this idea of letting things pass through, I think it's actually very powerful, and I think it's analogous to to not holding on to things, particularly guilt, particularly regret, particularly a sense of maybe martyrdom. Maybe I think it's I don't think it's unusual for us people, for one, to carry a sense of victimhood. And sometimes we can allow that sense of victimhood to be elevated in our minds into a type of martyrdom. And it can be a little bit self-aggrandizing. And it can be something that we allow to define us in almost vainglorious ways. Look at how much I've suffered. Look at how much I'm suffering, and how good am I? How stoic am I? How noble am I to suffer the way I've suffered? And maybe maybe we hold on to that sense for too long. Now, I need to tread carefully and clearly here. I mean, there are, of course, many cases where what we're carrying, we need help to unload. We need to sit down with a therapist or a counsellor or a psychiatrist or whoever it might be. We might need medication to shift something chemical in our brain. We might need prolonged therapy of a kind that really suits us and helps us process and deal with things. But, I am a big believer in, looking at our own toolkit, looking at our own resources and trying to train ourselves to examine our own stuff and to try and have an approach that is fluid and flexible. Sometimes it's a real close-up lens. Sometimes it's a lens that goes way out, because perspective is really important, I think. And we need a perspective that is, almost, almost a sort of a literal stepping outside of oneself and seeing oneself and going, how am I performing in life at the moment? How am I doing in life at the moment? How am I living? How am I treating myself? How am I treating others? Am I well? Because often we're way too close to ourselves to have a true sense of that. And so we try to draw out the lens and go, okay, what do other people see? What do I see as I look at myself? And then there's also that's very kind of spatial and physical and visual, but there's also the idea of temporal perspective, to think about time and a time perspective, when I can draw out and go, oh, okay. This is a bit like what I was talking about last week, the idea of, how long a moment can be in one's life. So I was arguing last week that a moment can be much longer than a conventional moment. It's not just a beat, a second, a minute. A moment could be weeks, months, years. Oh yeah, that was a pretty tough moment in my life. Okay, I know. I accept conventionally we'd say that was a tough time or a difficult period. But, in a way, these are moments. It's like what's the U2 song came in my head. I'm stuck in a moment and I can't get out of it. That's that is a thing. I mean, I feel that's a very easy concept to grasp. But this idea of, using these approaches to look at ourselves, look at our own stuff, our own struggles, are just, just as a useful exercise of self-care, kind of checking in with ourselves and having a look and having a listen and just almost going very quiet and very still and very deep and just breathing in that space and breathing in that moment and listening deeply to oneself and sensing oneself. And it's like we're listening for feedback. We're listening for our own ripple. We're listening for a flutter, a tremor, a stirring somewhere. And maybe there won't be anything there. Maybe in that moment things are very still and calm and well. Maybe there's a profound presence of ease and rightness. And you know what I mean by rightness. A type of alignment, a type of balance. And if that's the case, brilliant. Brilliant. Enjoy that moment. Enjoy that sensation. But don't be disturbed or troubled or freaked out if that moment passes. Because it will, most likely. Because that's what it is to be alive. That's what it is to stumble through the days and the weeks and the months and the years. That's what it is to be reactive and responsive and sensitive. That's what it is to feel things. That's what it is to have things that we hold on to and don't let go of, or are not ready to let go of. And if in that deep, quiet listening state you do hear tremors or flutters, or you sense ripples, or you sense a stirring, or you sense an imbalance or an unease, pay attention to it. Pay attention to it. That's you telling yourself something. That's you, something in you going, this needs attention. This needs to be listened to. This needs minding. Or this needs a light shone on it. Don't ignore it. Because there's healing in there. And there's learning. And there's potentially growth. Or there's potentially settling or the calming of something. To my mind, those are very positive things. And it may be that you go and look at that thing and you're like, whoa, not today. But that's okay. That's okay too, because you can look at that and go, do you know what? I don't have what's needed at the moment to really deal with that. But I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to acknowledge it and go, okay, I'll get back to that. I may need help. Or I'll get back to that when my energy's in a slightly different place. When I feel I have the resolve to step into that space in myself. And, you know, in general, I mean, that would be part of my broader view of how we hold ourselves. It's to be forgiving, and it's to be tolerant of the mess and tolerant of those areas that do unsettle us, those areas that are a constant reminder of our imperfection. And perfection is never the goal. So I mean, that's a relationship to develop as well. To be really comfortable and accepting of those parts of ourselves that are never easy to deal with and never easy to face. But they are part of us. They are part of, you know, who we are. They are part of the makeup. And they might be part of the thing that makes us, I don't know, they might be part of the thing that makes us thrive in other areas of our life. They might be part of the thing that makes us really attractive in some ways to others. Because we're not fragmented beings. Everything's connected. And no matter how we may like to compartmentalize or how we may like to lock certain rooms, they're always there. Those shut away parts of us are always there. And yeah, like to come back to what I was talking about before, the idea of holding on to things and the idea of staying in suffering, and the idea of staying in a state of being punished, which is maybe another way of saying, describing suffering. Well, they're different. They're different. Because suffering may not be punishment, but punishment often involves suffering. And I'm very interested in the idea of giving yourself permission to no longer suffer. Giving yourself permission to walk free from that particular psychological or emotional prison, or that psychological or emotional confinement. Because I'm convinced a lot of our personal pain narratives, or our personal trauma narratives, could be described in that way. That we're serving sentences. We're serving long periods of a type of incarceration of our souls, of our being, of our emotional selves, of our psychological selves. And we may believe that the power to be released from that confinement lies elsewhere, that it lies outside us, that it requires someone else to release us, or someone else to save us, or someone else to liberate us. And that may be part of the story, that may be part of what happens, because people have profound effects on us. And that's not unusual. I mean, I've often, over the years, I've often thought of my wife in that way, as someone who saved me from myself. But it's also sort of an abdication of responsibility in myself. When you place your salvation in the hands of somebody else, you're not really taking responsibility for your own emergence, your own transcendence. And I mean, ultimately, that's the real work of growth. That's the real work of personal evolution. I think it's the real work of maturation. And that's the work that has to be done by you and you alone. And when I say you, of course, I mean me. And it's not that one has to exist independently of the other. This isn't a mutually exclusive thing. Because sometimes another person can give you the conviction, or the motivation, or the strength to travel by yourself. And I think one trap we fall into, and again, when I say you, I mean me. When I say we, I mean me. So one trap we fall into is that we do work on ourselves at one point in our life, and then we think the work is done. And often that's in kind of early adulthood, in our, maybe in our 20s, and we go, no. And I mean, I've definitely been guilty of this. No, I went to therapy. I went to therapy a long time ago. It was really useful, and it was very intense, and it had a huge impact on me for the better. And I've done that now. And you kind of go, yeah, but that was, over 23 years ago. Maybe you could use another bit of help now. And yeah, I definitely could. That's there's no doubt. I would benefit from sitting down with a professional in that area of therapy, counselling, psychology, whatever it might be. So it's, that's part of the equation. And I'm sitting here going, hey, try this. These are tools that we, what's in our own toolkit. But again, it's not to close the door on other avenues of learning, other avenues of help. And I just think generally I think what it is it's bloody exhausting. I mean, that's the truth. Like to work on oneself and to face one's own stuff is daunting and exhausting. And so it's easier just to kind of, I'll just crack on with something else. I'll just muddle through in some other area, or I'll immerse myself in work or in projects or in focusing on another person and their stuff. And it's a way of avoiding ourselves. So that's one to watch out for. And I mean, think about it. This is real. This is real basic psychology. The more we're trying to avoid something, the more power it has over us. The more it urgently needs our attention. If we're constantly looking away from it, or constantly, slipping that punch, that's telling us something. It's like, come on now, you can't. It's the proverbial elephant in the room, or the metaphorical elephant in the room. I don't think there's a proverb about elephants in a room, is there? An elephant in the room is not welcome. Do you know that proverb? An elephant in the room blocks the light. An elephant in the room doesn't let you see what's on TV. An elephant in the room is concerning because if there isn't a toilet in the same room. Yeah. But yeah. But there you go. Look. That's kind of where my head is at, thinking about these things, the unknown, approaching the unknown, thinking about our own toolkit, letting things pass through, and giving ourselves permission to shake off certain shackles, certain manacles, certain burdens. And I'm sure I've pitched this before, maybe not as bluntly, but and again, I really have to rush in and kind of interject. I appreciate that this might not be in everybody's gift to do this for themselves. There might be other factors at play, other challenges that make this much easier said than done. And I mean, it is much easier said than done. I acknowledge that straight away. But the question is this serving me? Is my sense of burden, or my sense of victimhood, my sense of suffering, my sense of being wronged, my sense of resentment, is it serving me? Like, what's this? And that's, you might go, oh, well, that's, it's just an emotion, it's just a feeling I have, it's just a complex combination of memories and emotional responses and the fears and anxieties and angers, related to that, and that's in my body now, and I can't shift it, or I can't shake it. But I think, it's useful to try and view it differently and to go, well, is it serving me? Is this serving me? Is it helping me get somewhere else better than where I am now? Is it, is this a good place to stay? And I know some people might argue, well, it's this is my body's response to where I am, and I don't feel I can move from here. Might be my nervous system keeps responding this way, and I can't escape it. And then you come back to, well, how do you get back in your body? How do you put in place habits that help you decelerate emotionally, psychologically, energetically? How do you do things that keep you calm or encourage calmness? How do you quiet the brain? How do you slow the heart rate? I mean, there's ways to do these things. There are ways to do these things. But to use this idea from self-defense and martial arts that I've spoken about before at different times in different contexts, it's trying to see or trying to cultivate or trying to create that window of perspective, of appraisal, of time and space, where it's a certain amount of anticipation I'm hesitating to use, but it's a window of I see what's going on here, and instinctively I have this reaction, but can I insert a moment, a beat, a few beats to go, okay, hold on, I'm going to try and respond differently. I'm going to try and change this cycle, this pattern of stimulus or of provocation or of threat and reaction, and make it a reaction or a reflex, and try and go to a different response system that allows me to make a different choice. And that might be deflection, that might be, like, to go back to what I was saying earlier, this idea of letting something pass through. That's kind of the idea. It's to just buy yourself an extra breath, buy yourself that time to go, oh no, hold on, I don't need to get sucked into this again and again and again and again. I can find a way to sidestep it. I can find a way to deflect. I can find a way to reposition myself in relation to this thing that keeps destabilizing me. And that's not a bad area to think about as well. The idea of movement, the idea of positioning, the idea of where am I standing now? Because of course a new position is a new perspective. And I was talking to a friend about this last week when we were doing qigong. Just the idea of when do you move? What moves you? And I was talking about the idea that, or the typical reaction when somebody important enters a space, somebody of very high status in society, in the world. I'm talking, kings and queens, celebrities, politicians, leaders, presidents, sports stars, whoever. People who have a certain status, a certain field of energy around them, it's given to them by others. And when they enter a space, what happens? Everybody else gets very busy. Everybody else gets highly energized, highly agitated. I don't mean in terms of stressed, although it is like it's a disruptive element that shakes up the energy of everybody else. And the person of power or the person of high status, they can be very still while everybody else scrambles around frantically, frenetically, obsequiously, and tries to accommodate that person and make things easier and better for that person. And that's a recognizable dynamic. But you think about the energy in the world that's generated just from that dynamic. It's kind of mad to try and get your head around that. But bring it back to yourself. Bring it back to yourself and go, well, can I not be the sovereign of my own space? And I don't mean your home, your apartment. I mean your body, your energy, this living thing, this organism that is you. And you think about how your energy gets pulled all over the place by different things wanting something from you or needing something from you, whether it's, work or whether it's children or partners or, whatever it might be, the busyness of your life and the busyness of work and the demands of survival. And your energy's just like, woo, 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 getting pulled this way and that. And you're constantly chasing yourself. And what if you try to get in the way of that and go, no, I'll move when I'm ready. I recognize what has to be done. I'm aware of my obligations. I'm aware of the logistical demands that today presents. But I'm going to move when I'm ready. I'm moving out of the past into the next moment. And I'm driving, or I'm steering, or I'm the instigator of that movement. I'm not being pulled or yanked or jerked into the next moment. I'm not sending my energy in advance to appease somebody else, to placate somebody else, to meet somebody else's needs. I choose to move when I'm ready to move, with a clear mind, with clear intention, with openness, with soundness, with groundedness. That's good energy. That's good energy to bring to the next moment. That's good energy to bring to the unknown. So play with that when you have a moment. Okay? Okay. That's it. That's it for this week's episode. If you get a chance, if you're in Dublin, running until the 20th of July at Bewley's Cafe Theatre on Grafton Street, lunchtime theatre, you can see a brilliant play which is an adaptation of 2 short stories from James Joyce's Dubliners. And it's called Counterparts and A Little Cloud. And it's performed by Volta Theatre Company. And the 2 actors, 2 men who run the company, are Jim Roach and Liam Hurricane. And I saw it the other day. I brought my daughter Maeve, and I loved it. Maeve is 10 and not renowned for her love of Joyce. I know she did enjoy it on some level, but she was dragged reluctantly to this theatrical space. But it was brilliant, really, really excellent and beautifully performed. And as it happens, Jim Roach, Harry Jim, if you're listening, is an old friend of mine from a million years ago. We acted together in university when we were in the drama society there. So it's really nice to see someone that you've known from quite a young age doing the do and doing it really well. So I know there are still some seats available. The show is something of a hit, but look it up online, and as I say, it'll be running until the 20th of July, and it's just such a great, it's a great bit of Joyce, of course, a great bit of James Joyce. It's a great bit of Dublin characters and Dublin place names and Dublin vernacular, Dublin language, Dublin cadence. It's a lovely bit of time travel back to the early 20th century, and beautifully played by the 2 lads with great live musical accompaniment by a couple of great musicians as well. And what struck me about it more than anything was how relatable the characters were. Men dealing with their own frustrations, their own delusions and disillusions, their own vanities, their own sense of failure, and how they expressed that just felt so palpable and recognisable and eternal, which just brings me back to what I was saying about, we're all repeating ourselves all the time. That is the human experience. That's the madness of the human experience, and it's what existential philosophers have lost their minds over and written tomes about. It's Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain. It's Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. But you only have to see the play once, and I highly recommend it. It's really great work by the lads. A lovely show, and do yourself a favour, go and take in some great art, some great acting, some beautiful language, done really well. Okay, that's it. I'm gone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something from this, and I will be back next week with something else. You can find me on social media. The Clear Out Podcast is on Facebook and Instagram. It's on YouTube. If you really like what you hear, what enters your ears, your mind, your soul, you can throw me some love using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com /theclearout, and for the price of a cup of tea or a sticky almond bun from Bewley's Cafe, you can support this independent podcast, and that would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, throw me some love on social media, a comment, a review, share it with somebody else, recommend it to somebody else. That would be just marvellous, and I really would be grateful. Okay, take it easy, mind yourselves, stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon. All the best. Bye.